Subscribe to the Lightsport and Ultralight Flyer web video magazine with hundreds and hundreds of videos now online, including airshow coverage, Rotax engine tech tips, Rotax 377, 447, 503, 532, and 582 engine rebuilding videos, each 2 hours in length, propeller maintenance, advisories and repairs, BRS parachute saves, Bing carb updates, and much, much more. Get a yearly subscription at www.ultralightflyer.com. Okay, Dad, every once in a while we do screw up. So let's start with that part and then we'll move on into this airplane.
Well, the thing that it's not then is retractable. That's what I said the last time on our other Lightning video, and it never was. But the reason why I think I went down that path unknowingly is because when this is built as an experimental amateur-built airplane, it has the capability to run close to 200 miles an hour. Now that's not allowed under light sport parameters, so it can't be a light sport and go that fast, but the airplane itself, the design, is capable of that kind of speed. And in that same airplane, on that same flight, we saw 200 or right at it, according to what the instrument said, however accurate that was. We also slowed down to 40. That's a 5-to-1 ratio. That's beyond the holy grail of 4-to-1 from slowest to fastest. Quite a remarkable development by these folks from Shelbyville, Tennessee.
And this is one sleek little airplane. I mean, you talk about a sports car of the light sport industry, this has got to be it.
You know, there's some really nice airplanes coming out of Europe that look as slick as this does, but this is, to me, right up there with the best of any of them. But this is a totally American-made, designed, and brewed airplane. Everything about it's U.S. From Shelbyville, Tennessee, right close to the center of the country. Same folks that do the Jabiru, which is an imported kit that they assemble, also composite. That probably gave them some of their experience, but they've had a lot of success with this. There were, at last count I know of, there were more than 80 of these built as kits. 40 of those were flying, and then they got into the LSA space. So they have some real credential with this airplane. This isn't a brand new, untested airplane on the market. This has got some background to it.
But they had to do some modifications in order to get it down into the light sport aircraft category.
They had to slow it down a little bit. You can't have a constant speed or adjustable pitch prop on a light sport aircraft, and that's one way to slow it down a little bit, is to get rid of that kind of more complicated hardware, which is not allowed. And of course it does not have any retractable gear, but the wingspan is a little bit different on some of these. The other one is a bit shorter to go a little bit faster. But this one, the builder of this airplane, this is one of these ELSAs, experimental light sport aircraft, meaning the owner built some of the airplane. He says it was about 45%. That's a little bit less than the 51% rule for experimental amateur built, which you can also do, and then you can go fast with it, but then you got to have a medical. So we get into some of the ins and outs of the new program here, but this one was built by a gentleman who flew it into Brennan Airport just to the north of here, said he touched down at 33 knots. That's really slow. So again, 33 to 120, that's right at that 4-to-1 number, and that's a very impressive performance out of this sleek little airplane.
What are the advantages of building it as an ELSA rather than buying from the factory as a factory built?
Well, let's talk about it. There's 3 different ways you can build this airplane, or have this airplane. One of them is fully built SLSA, Special Light Sport Aircraft. That means the factory does it all. You put the key in and go. Well, after you get some training, because they all require that, because these airplanes are so performance-oriented that a guy used to fly on a 182. Of course, it needs a little bit of retraining to fly an airplane like this. Not hard, but different. So that's one way. The second way is ELSA, which is what this particular airplane here is. It's experimental light sport aircraft. That means the owner does the building, but it doesn't have to meet 51%. It could be, it wasn't in this case, but it could be as simple as bolting on the prop or something, and that's what the owner does. And that airplane, when it's built and when it receives its airworthiness certificate, has to conform to the SLSA version identically. Same engine, same flap, same everything, same instruments, whatever the factory said it was. As an SLSA, you have to mimic that perfectly when you get your airworthiness. But once you get your airworthiness, you can then do anything you want to it. And you can do the maintenance on it as well, with some training. The final category is experimental amateur built. That means you do have to do 51%, and it requires that you have a valid medical. And then you can cruise with this thing quite a bit faster. You could put a constant speed or adjustable pitch prop on it. You can change out the instruments. You can do all your own maintenance without asking anybody. But the downside is, if there's a downside, you remain the manufacturer for life. Any one of those categories, whichever it starts at, it doesn't change from that. There is a way to go from SLSA to ELSA, but even that's a kind of a special condition thing. But if it's experimental amateur built, it cannot go to LSA, even if it meets the parameters. Now that means the parameters mean, another gentleman we were just talking to says, well, I'd like to build it as a kit and go fast with it, but then if I lost my medical, what do I do? Well, you make some adjustments, you slow it back down. Again, the factory can advise you on that. Now you can still operate it as an experimental amateur built, but you don't need the medical anymore, but it has to meet the LSA standards. It's not an LSA, it's still an amateur built, but it meets the standards, therefore you don't need a medical. So that's about as many choices as you could expect out of a single model of airplane, and the folks at Arion Aircraft are the ones who make this right down there in Shelbyville and offer you all those options.
So we have a very sleek, long nose on this old girl. What are they getting hidden underneath it?
It's got a big engine under here. This is a 3300 Jabiru in here, and that's mostly what they sell in this airplane. In fact, I don't think it's available with any other engines. There are two versions of the Jabiru that are common in the United States. The 2200, a 4-cylinder, 85 horsepower engine, or the 3300, 6-cylinder, 120 horsepower engine. And at 120 horsepower and knowing where you can run at max continuous power on this, this is going to cruise right at 120 knots, which is a perfectly legal number and right at the top of the category.
Now let's have a look at some of the interior in it now.
Let's go look inside. It's really pretty. I love this airplane. I mean, it is comfortable. Look at this finish in here. This is just gorgeous. With the custom logo, embroidered lightning on it. Nice little padded thing right about where your elbow bumps. That's very thoughtful. The seats are comfortable. They got a deep slope down to them. And this particular airplane, here's the owner's manual on it. He's got a whole bunch of information in here for you and whatnot. But it's got the call letters 81DJ. That's because this is built by Don Gelante, his name is, and he is the builder of this ELSA airplane.
Now, he must have come down here prepared for the show, because it looks like he's got everything but the kitchen sink in behind him.
It does. Well, you can probably get the kitchen sink in there too, I think. But yeah, a lot of room back here, and let's see how far down I can get. It goes quite a ways down there, about down to this baseline right here. So that's a lot of area back here. I don't know what the capacity is, but I'm going to guess it's in the neighborhood of about 50 or 60 pounds. That'll let you take along everything you need in here. And a nice broad cockpit with a nice, nicely padded center here. This would be comfortable for two fellows or two occupants to cruise for a long distance.
So this is quite the panel they have here as well.
It is, and you know, first thing I got to start off, I mean, you spend all this time in an airplane holding onto the joystick. Well, this has got this beautiful, nicely carved joystick. Very comfortable to the reach, and I see this one is really oriented to the left hand. Well, that's logical, because you get your right hand using the throttle here and your other controls, carb heat, choke, cabin heat, and the other one is the other way. So it's suited left and right. I like that. It's got just a nice touch. In addition to that, coming up from the lower part of the cowling here, move the belt out of the way, your left-right controls on the fuel selector, very obvious where you're at. That's a nice thing. Electric trim over here on the right, electric flaps on the left, and when your camera goes back out and looks, you'll see that there's markings on the flaps that show the position of the flaps, 10, 20, or 30. I'm looking underneath your camera now, and you can see very easily the degrees down. So that's a nice touch. Don't have to have anything on the panel, just look outside the window, which has got this giant big window around us, by the way. Lots of visibility in this airplane. Then up on the panel here, you got room for pretty much whatever you want to put in it. Dave Gelante's choices in this case were the Dynon 120, 140. Actually, that's not right. I believe these are the Grand Rapids instrumentations that they're using here. In fact, I'm sure they are. With the engine display in the middle, this is a familiar instrument to anybody in the ultralight world. We've had this particular one from Grand Rapids for many years, but these are their two glass screens, and they're very competitive with any of the other ones out there. A lot of information. They're not on today because they've got the battery disconnected and so forth. You do have an indicator, though, in addition to these controls and the markings on the wing. Right up here above the left of these two glass cockpits, you've got a wing flap indicator and a trim indicator, and he's got these marked where he likes them, I suppose, for takeoff in his particular airplane. And then, of course, in the center here, he's got his intercom and his radio stack.
Now, Dan, there was a gentleman that was in this just before you were, and he had to be well over 6 feet tall. How do they adjust for the two of you?
Yeah, I don't know what his height really was, but I don't know if your camera can get down in here or not. Let's give it a try, and I'll put my hand behind it. Maybe that'll show it. There's a little black knob down here, And as you move that down a little bit, then the pedals move back and forward over quite a range. It must be at least a foot. And you can just push, I'm pushing the pedals forward on my side now, and now I am out to my toes. In fact, I can't quite touch the pedals. So you could be that tall. I'm about 5'10", but you could easily be 6'3", 4", I don't know, and have these pedals in a comfortable place. You want them back, just reach up here, pull the knob down, and pull them back with your toes, which I've done pretty easily this time. A little tricky at first, but I got it that quick, so will anyone else. Now they're in a very comfortable position again. And again, the slope of this seat, now we're sitting level here, so this is not an artificial tail dragger thing, but the seat slopes down so low and curves up nicely here. This is very comfortable seating in this airplane. It's not always the case in an airplane, and when you spend several hours flying somewhere, sure nice to have comfortable seats.
And how do they supply ventilation to the pilots?
Well, you got the choice of a couple of inlets here. They've got, of course, the outside inlet too. But on each side of the cockpit here, there's an adjustable. You can adjust the volume of air coming in, and you can direct it toward you either way. Does that 120 horsepower, like we said earlier, will move you along at 120 knots, right at the top of the allowed category. And Dave Gelante, the owner of the airplane, says that in his experience flying with this engine in this airplane, he's seeing between 5 and 5.5 gallons per hour, but 5.5 would be at a lower elevation or lower altitude, and up at about 8,500 feet, he's seeing 5 gallons. So he said he plans on about a 3-hour flight with a generous 1-hour reserve to check out a landing area if you need to at that time, and that's all with the standard tanks, which are 22 gallons. You can get an optional 30-gallon tank, which will take you up around 6 hours, and as we discussed, then you got to bring something else along in the cockpit with you, because I can't go 6 hours without a rest break.
So if we want to get a little more information on this airplane, then where will we go?
We go to their company website, which is flylightning.net, not .com, and you got to put the fly in there, so flylightning.net.
And do you have a flight report on this airplane?
I do, and in that one I did not say it had retractable gear, the mistake we made earlier, and it's a lovely airplane, and you want to read that on bydanjohnson.com or bydanjohnson.com.